Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to the Accursed. Repent. Repent! Your time on this earth is brief and filled with suffering and indignities. Why extend your torment into the afterlife by living an existence filled with sin? Go forth, make good with those you crossed, and quash your evil instincts. There's still time left for you to find a better way. I know a vicar who closes his sermons like that almost every single time. A real preacher. I imagine he'd make a good shade if the family of ruin are inclined toward one of an evangelical nature. Some would describe him as too harsh, too obvious, too histrionic, however. The Shades, they like their tragedies and adore their traumas, but would rather see the victims crying out in this outraged way than stand at a pulpit and deliver the castigations personally. Shades prey on guilt, you see. Guilt, shame, and especially those who feel neither, despite doing terrible things that should encourage such feeling. It's one thing to target someone who already feels sorrowful, though feeling sorry for yourself is very different from feeling sorry for someone who you have wronged. But the Shades really want to find those at ease with their sin. The corporate fat cats, the politicians and royals on the take, the husbands cheating on their wives, the mothers who beat their children, all of them justify their actions. The fat cat, he says, why shouldn't I take my bonus from the company pension pot? Haven't I worked hard enough? Haven't I earned it? The disgraced prince, he says, my country has never rewarded me adequately for my service, my sacrifice. I am therefore completely at ease, leaking trivial secrets to an enemy state. After all, what can they really do with it? The husband argues, my wife refuses to have sex with me. Therefore, I am justified in finding it elsewhere. And, of course, the mother, she says, well, my mother always beat me whenever I spoke out of turn. Therefore, and it didn't do me any harm. Therefore, I am equally as justified to raise a hand, a fist, a belt when my kids are little shits. The Shades watch all of this behaviour, they detect it, they judge it, and they make the lives of these people utterly miserable. They toy with their traumas, they force them to experience true loss, because grinding people like this down to nothing, with a possession here, a haunting there, turning the tables so it's the abuser being gaslit, the mega rich receiving the red notices. That is what provides life to the dead of this family. But the Shades don't kill. Let's make that perfectly clear. It's the one line most of these ruiners will never cross, or so we say. You see, they have the belief that if the music stops, the game ends. And Shades don't want the game to end, because for as long as someone is suffering a just punishment, they're able to luxuriate in all that beautiful, tenebrous sorrow. When I was first introduced to this family, I thought to myself, who would want to exist in this way? Sure, we have parties, we enjoy spinning tales and comparing undoings, a real trauma Olympics. Everyone goes away from such an event having experienced a form of catharsis, and unlike a lot of other accursed, it feels as if we have a purpose. But why would anyone choose to dwell in misery? Well, As it should be clear by now, not everyone gets to choose their damnation, or who damns who, or with what, but I can tell you that in every person I have ever met, especially those who had to fight against the odds in their life, there's a desire to make life better for those like us after our time is up, if not during our time, and an even stronger pull to make life worse for those who fucks with us. Just don't ask a shade to examine their own sins, or you might turn one inside out. There must have been a family head for the Shades, but whoever that actually was is long forgotten. The Shades are an extremely loose collective compared to other families, especially compared to the Zeds, and in fact the Zeds are a pertinent family to raise because while they are, in a fashion, anathematic to the Shades' desire to draw out pain, the common rumour surrounding a Shade progenitor is that it was a Zed who extinguished their existence. I suppose there's a comfort in that a Reaper is just waiting to settle your account, and when you're ready, they'll do the deed, no matter how powerful or well-connected you are, no matter which family you happen to be the head of. That leaves the loose Shade family that we know. Today is a two-tier system. It has been since time immemorial. There are elders, and then there's the rest of us. There's talk that some of the elders, real do-as-I-say, not-as-I-do types, go back to the time of the Qin dynasty, but I don't know for sure. I know they harbour long and old grudges, and time was they would hire out their services to those who had been wronged and were unable to resolve their problems personally. Unlike the Furies, these ancient Shades weren't assassins and destroyers, they were the scales of justice. When something was imbalanced, they would ensure karma balanced out. Therefore, across historic China and India, I'm told, you'd hear of these animated corpses that people would pray to set right something wrong. Make a token payment, say a prayer to the Shade, maybe make a promise that you will revere your deceased ancestors forevermore, and the Shade would do right by you. They would occupy the house of your enemy and make their life a living hell until they changed the errors of their ways, or at the very least addressed them. The most infamous is a Shade that goes by the name Sakshi. They spent 12 long months making an entire family of corrupt, decadent, indolently sadistic rulers repent for the crimes they had committed against their people. Sakshi never drew blood, apparently, but threaded visions through each of these bastards' dreams, spoiled their food with maggots, made their kilala taste like blood, put each of them in a position where they were witness to their peers' true thoughts and actions, and more. It only took weeks for the youngest of this family to start seeing the error of their ways, having their breakdowns. A breakdown, I should note, doesn't immediately translate into a recovery, but Sakshi was a master, still is, apparently, of breaking someone down and building them back up again. But the oldest of this family, the most powerful, is probably most appropriate. The ruler among rulers held fast to his convictions. No sorcerer, magician, spirit, or god was going to tell him how to live his life, and how to rule especially. And so he utilized priests, monks, wise folk from all around to purge his palace of all evils. Everywhere was open to them. Every artifact, every room, every individual. Bar one. And this was Sakshi's greatest weapon. Sakshi was always able to identify the greatest weakness in a target's arsenal. And for this particular ruler, it was his mother, an aged woman in her 80s or 90s, which was quite some age for the time, I can tell you. And it still is now. He would never have a word spoken against her. He would never cross her. He still craved her approval. And so he was aware that by recruiting these various expulsionists into his palace to cleanse it, if she became aware of it, she would judge him as having failed in some way. And so he kept her insulated. He ensured that they went nowhere near her. And so she was the person that Sakshi had chosen to possess during this passion play. And so Sakshi watched as the ruler grew more and more frantic, convincing him that this bejeweled trinket was cursed or that crown was impure. He stripped himself of all wealth, but not out of shame or guilt. He still hadn't broken. It was cowardice. He didn't want to face up to his crimes. It took Sakshi a full year of work. But what a year. I can only imagine the urges that Sakshi must have been satiating themselves with. They had broken this ruler down into a peasant in a palace. His family pled with him, admit to your crimes, but he would not. His servants fled his mania as he became more and more destructive. The only person he had left as counsel was his dear mother. And it was at the end of the year that he finally approached her. He finally went to her and said, "Mother, I fear that there is a great evil in this palace, but I do not understand why it is attacking me." And so it was for the first time in this year that Sakshi, through this host, through this mother, spoke to the sun. "I died 9 months ago," said Sakshi. For the body she was possessing had indeed done so. "But in your self-centeredness," said Sakshi, "your compulsion to absolve yourself, you never even noticed I stopped eating, stopped drinking, stopped breathing. You left me here to moulder, and even as I wished you would come to me, you would not. For the only person in your world is you. I do not judge you. It is for you to judge yourself. But know that I am gone, and I am long past the point of consecration." Sakshi left the body at that point, and it rapidly decomposed before the ruler's eyes. He bawled like an infant, and Sakshi lingered long enough to drink that in. His mother was dead. What had he done? What had he done? He cried out, and from then on, he was a better man. Or so it's said. These kinds of tales, they bring to mind certain hypocrisies, as far as I'm concerned. The Shades say, "We do not kill." But did Sakshi, with his famous tale, who is still among us, as I say, thousands of years on, allow that old woman to die just to prove a point? Is there a difference if you draw blood or just allow a heart to stop? Was Sakshi's time wasted trying to make one corrupt family repent? There was a point of pride here for Sakshi, undoubtedly. This was a victory that Sakshi needed. What does that tell us about the life Sakshi once led? The focus on the rich and the powerful may be a moral imperative for many Shades, but to believe that such sins are not also present, rampant even among the lower classes and castes, is an outright lie, a self-deception. And yet the Shades are constantly telling themselves, we only ever punch up. While they do so, they allow a festering pool of resentment, crime, sin, whatever you want to call it, moulder away, just like the ruler's mother, beneath their gaze. I sometimes wonder if the Shades are driven to make amends for all these injustices because of something they did. I mention again the old myth about the dead and the oracle that I spoke to you about when we were discussing the poltergeists. That first Shade, whoever it was, drove the oracle into a catastrophic depression, not because she deserved it, but because the founder wanted something. The dead are governed by urges. Are they Shades because they are morally obliged to right wrongs and strike those who deserve guilt with it? Or is it because they need it? The dead, the shades, they need that emotion. Are they not just fooling themselves with an elaborate way of invoking sadness? Isn't it just denying one's damnation to do this and say we're doing it because it's the right thing to do? No. No. You're doing it because you have no choice. You're doing it because you are damned.